Welcome to the third chair with our special guest tonight, Eric Batteiger.
Yay, I'm glad you got that right.
That's right. Pastor, outdoorsman, has some great stories.
Yes, he does.
Please welcome Eric.
Welcome to the third chair. We have Eric Batteiger. Is that how you say it? Batteiger.
Yeah. Like better up.
Batteiger.
There
The batter goes grr.
Exactly. That'll work.
And Peter is here again.
Yo!
With his trying to be a pirate still.
Yes.
Hopefully they air these in order so they get the pirate joke.
Yeah.
So I understand you're a great outdoors person.
I do. I love the outdoors. Do a lot of different things outdoors.
Yeah, you're in the right state for it.
I know. I thought, when I was, we moved out west to Wyoming when I was a young teenager, just in junior high, and I was from West Virginia, which I enjoyed the outdoors there. I was in Scouts and stuff, and that's really where I kind of got my start.
Pretty country.
That's some very beautiful country in there, so scouting kind of got me started. But when we moved out west, and I saw the Rocky Mountains, I thought, this is it.
So where did you move in Wyoming?
Gillette, Wyoming.
Okay.
Gillette.
Which is in the northeast.
Any
part
relationship to the razor?
Well, it's just, they call it the sharpest town in the West, so I don't know.
The sharpest town in the West. Oh, man. That's good.
You like that one, huh, Peter?
I like that one. Yeah, it's really good. That's good, yeah.
But we lived there for a few years, and then my father moved us down to the Denver area. We lived in Parker, and I graduated from high school up in Castle Rock.
No.
So, okay.
Yeah.
It's not too far from here.
Right, not too far.
And so when you go outdoors, what is your favorite activity out?
Well, I just enjoy hiking. I just enjoy being outdoors, and what I've been learning in the past, 5 years or so after doing this, my entire life, is just being present. The whole idea of mindfulness and being aware of your surroundings and so forth more and more. And so that has made hiking so much more enjoyable and so much more beneficial for me. But I'm a sportsman. I love to hunt and fish and a backpack and all that stuff and day trips. So anything to get outside.
So where do you go fishing around here? Because there aren't a super amount of that's one thing Colorado isn't.
Well, not like the Midwest, but there are plenty of places to fish, and we have warm water fishing. A lot of people think, there's no warm water fishing, but we have Pueblo Reservoir down the road, and out east there's a bunch of reservoirs, John Martin Reservoir in the southeast part of the state, and up north there's some state parks. Barr State Park has a nice lake, and there's some beautiful places just here up on the front range and so forth.
So what would be like cold water fishing? Do you have to go to Minnesota for that?
No, cold water fishing would be anything that, is not warm water fishing.
Yeah, exactly.
Your warm water
like you have to go to Alaska to cold water fish?
No. But the mountain streams and so forth, where it's basically snow runoff, all year. And so that's where your trout and those kind of fish will be hanging out. But,
sure.
Have you ever gone to Twin Lakes?
Yes. Sure. Yeah. It's a beautiful spot.
Yeah, we had a guest on the show that
we interviewed her at Twin Lakes.
Oh, really?
We filmed her fishing there.
Oh, yeah. Neat spot.
Yeah, she had a company called Colorado Tight Flies.
Yep.
Really interesting story. Young gal just decided out of the blue, I'm going to tie fishing flies, fly fishing flies. Used to do nails, put that creativity to work, and she gets orders from all over the country. Yeah, and of course she's kind of goth looking and young, and of course most of the fly fishermen guys are like, totally have the stereotype. Yeah.
That's interesting. But I just got a rod that I ordered last week, a fly rod. I'm not a fly fisherman. It seems so complex. It seems so, and it's expensive, to do it. And I thought about getting into it before, but I found out this ancient Japanese form of fly fishing called tenkara. Have you heard of it?
Tenkara?
No. Tenkara fishing. No.
Is that where you use a stick of dynamite?
No, not quite.
No. And the fish go flying.
Exactly.
Fly fishing, you move.
But it's a fly rod, but it has no eyelets, no reel. It's a rod, a line, and a fly. That's what they call it.
Oh, wow.
So it's gaining popularity in this country quite a bit. But
really?
all you need is.
So what's the benefit?
The benefit is it's first of all, it's telescoping, so it folds up, different lengths.
Like the old Popeil pocket fisherman.
Yes, exactly. But these are quality rods. You can buy some cheap ones, but you can buy quality ones and spend as much money as you want to. But all you need is a few flies and some line, and that folds up, throw it in your backpack, and so that's where the cold water comes in. Mountain streams, high mountain lakes, things like that. This is really
So do you do
fun.
mostly fly fishing then?
No, this will be a new thing for me.
Okay.
I use
So
flies, of course, but always
Are
with
you
a
going
reel.
to use those big waders?
Yeah. But when I go up into the mountains, I don't carry all that stuff. So that's why I was looking for some simplistic, easy way to take flying equipment. And I came across this Tenkara. I've been studying it and finally bought my first rod, and I haven't used it yet, but I'm excited to give it a go.
So how often are you able to hike? Because you're a minister, I know you're busy,
Right,
and you get called at odd times.
It's very, very busy, and my wife has a very busy job. She's a school administrator, and so us trying to do stuff together is very difficult, even in the summer. But I go as often as I can and when I can. And so sometimes that's on a Friday or a Saturday. Sometimes it's the middle of the week if I can break away and just manipulate the schedule. So that's one nice thing about being a minister. You're called at all times and all days of the week. We typically have a day of the week off or two, but we can change that every once in a while. So
Don't you have honeydews on those days?
I do. I do have honeydews, and I try to get them all done in the wintertime.
There's a
Summer's
spark.
all-
Yeah,
You
it
can-
could be a
Summers and
problem
falls
if
are
you
outside.
take out the trash. Yeah.
Yeah.
Honey, I'm doing it once the snow hits. Yeah.
Do you
Piles
do
up.
any winter activities?
I do. I used to ski every week. Used to buy ski passes here in Colorado and ski a lot.
Those used to be better deals too.
Yeah, there used to be better deals, and skiing got very expensive, and gear got very expensive,
Yeah.
and so I've backed off on that, and went and bought a cheap pair of snowshoes, and I just snowshoe and
No, do you
get
get
out.
to get out and do that very often?
yeah.
Oh, okay, that's
And
fun.
I do ski, downhill ski every once in a while. I take the grandkids out, but once, twice a year, but not like I used to.
How
Used
many
to go every week.
grandkids do you have?
I have 7 right now, and 2 on the way.
Wow.
Two. How many kids did you have?
4.
Oh wow!
So yeah.
Now you're gonna have a new job involved with the outdoors.
Right. I've been in ministry all my life, and it's been very rewarding, and I'm looking forward to staying in ministry, till I can't do anything. But I have a unique opportunity to be involved in an outdoor ministry. So I've always been in a local church all my life, and for 40 plus years, been doing that kind of thing. And so now I have a camp that I'm associated with. It's called Colorado Christian Service Camp, or we do business as Camp Como, which is up near Fairplay, Colorado, which is just Como is a little town. It's a very interesting little town just north of Fairplay, about 12-15 miles. It was an old railroad. They had a little depot there, and it had a roundhouse there, where the miners and so forth went to Breckenridge, and across the hills there was a railroad that kept the miners and the people going. But we have 160 acres up there. Beautiful territory, and we have residential kids camps during the summer, all summer long, retreats during the winter, and I'll be able to work with that camp and helping them get the word out, and so we'll be doing some traveling and finding the constituent communications and things like that. So really looking forward to that. That's going to start in June.
So you get those, because you said in the summer mostly kids come.
Mostly kids.
Bible camps.
Yes.
So you get those kids hiking and like.
Oh yeah.
And it's like.
Oh yeah.
Okay, just follow me, kids. We're doing a
Exactly.
5-mile hike today.
Yep. And that's part of my ministry has always been outdoors. I've done that for recreation, of course, and for just self-enjoyment. But I've always loved to take people out to do a lot of backpacking. We have a lot of beautiful wilderness areas in Colorado.
Oh yeah.
But if you read in the Bible, there is just so much about God's creation that is really lining up with science right now, and the idea of retreating in nature is more than just going away and unplugging and getting away. There's a lot of healing that takes place. There's a lot of stuff that we're learning now that just coincides with Christian ministry so much. It's fascinating.
Can you mention like one of those things?
Well, let me first tell you, I kind of got on this a few years ago. I was listening to an NPR show, and they had a guest on there, a lady by the name of Florence Williams, and she had written a book called The 3-Day Effect, which was she was an outdoor journalist and wrote a lot for magazines like Outdoor Journal and so forth. And she had written this little book or booklet about her experience trying to figure out what is all the fuss about going out into nature and getting healed from stuff, emotional, psychological, maybe even physical things. And river guides, and I kind of call them the hippies, used to talk about 3-day magic. I don't know if you ever heard that term.
Yeah,
You get outside, get away from your life, and get into nature for at least 3 days. On the third day, stuff starts happening. You start feeling better and relaxing, things like that. So she wanted to do a little bit of a scientific study on it because she's not a woo-woo, type of person, tree hugger. But turns out that the tree huggers were right. There's a lot of science now that prove, what we used to call third day magic or the 3 day effect. That they were correct, that all kind of stuff happens, like blood pressure gets lowered, the bad stress hormones are lowered, and the good hormones increase, and things like that happen. And so what they've been doing, I don't know, probably for 10 or more years, and maybe some people longer than that, have been studying this from a scientific perspective and trying to figure it all out. So I'm looking at it from a Christian perspective and trying to figure out what does the scriptures have to say about this stuff.
And we're going to continue that thought when we come right back.
Right.
Welcome back to the third chair. We have our guest Eric back, and Peter, for some reason, is still here.
Hi.
A lot of people wrote in our show that the best 2 minutes were the 2 minutes that you weren't here.
Yeah, I know.
That was, at least for us, was the best one.
Oh, man, my fans love me.
I know.
Yeah, I get all kinds of mail.
So
Yes, bills. Lots of bills.
Yeah, I got one letter. It said you're almost as good as Peter.
Yeah, no.
I wonder what kind of mail I'm going to get now. What were you on with
Yeah,
those guys?
no. Doug, you're the eye candy on the show.
This show's in trouble.
Where the ship is sinking.
So Eric, you were telling us about going out in nature, and then you were trying, and makes you feel better, and you were looking at it from a Christian.
Well, let me go back to the story about this Florence Williams gal, this writer that wrote this 3 day effect. She kind of visited some different groups of people that were doing this and practicing this. She had gone out with a group of gals who had been trafficked in the sex industry, and they were doing a 3 day trip. Some veterans from war, they were experiencing PTSD. And she even took a friend of hers, another journalist who hates being out in nature, and she talked him into going. So it was an interesting story. So I followed up with her, and she had written. She later wrote a book called The Nature Fix, which really gets into more of the science and so forth of it, and more understandable for a layperson like me. So I'm not a biologist or naturalist or anything. I've never been educated in any of that. So I understood her book the way she wrote it. And so from then on, I've been reading and researching and gobbling this stuff up and comparing it to what I know about Scripture, and finding different authors who've been doing the same thing. In the world of Christianity, there's something called creation care, which is kind of taking care of the environment. So it's an environmental type Christian. And I know that's been a little bit controversial over the years of how far do you go and what's the purpose of taking care of nature and so forth. And but now I think people are getting more and more serious about it, and we understand what that means and looking into it. But reading different authors, Richard Louv is another author that I started reading. He wrote a book a number of years ago kind of highlighting some of this stuff, and he talks particularly about kids not being out in nature anymore. And he actually coined a phrase that they're using a lot now called nature deficit disorder. We have all these disorders, and not having kids outside creates some problems for kids. It doesn't mean every kid has to be on a farm or anything like that, but because we have to have cities, and not everybody has the privilege of living in a rural place or living in a place where they can get to outdoors easily. But because we have not sent kids outside, we're experiencing some difficulties with these kids, and even as adults, that nature now they're learning can fix. And some of the things you were mentioning, Peter, and the reduction of stress and just anxiety, depression, things like that. Even some other physical things that we can talk about. But because one of the things that Williams introduced me to and that I began reading about was Shinrin Yoku. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
That sounds kind of woo-woo, doesn't it? But it's a Japanese phrase that means, it literally means forest bathing, which again sounds kind of strange, but all it means is to be immersed in a forest somewhere.
Oh, you're refreshing yourself.
You're refreshing yourself and just experiencing that. And again, that sounds kind of just kind of weird and maybe even a little new agey, but there's a lot of science behind spending at least 2 hours a week in a forest. The benefits that come to you.
When my daughter, she went at the school in District 20 here in Colorado Springs.
Right.
In the 4th grade, you had to write an essay to get into this school. They have a school in the woods.
Right.
And
It's like a school in the woods.
yeah, it's a school in the woods because every district gets so much land.
Sure.
And she had to bus there in the morning, so she had to get up early. But that was her greatest year, and any excuse to go outside,
Yeah.
the teacher took, because he was like a great outdoorsman.
Right.
He taught him a lot. He had 2 things he taught him a lot: outdoorsmanship and writing. Her writing after that year was a lot better.
It does. It improves your cognitive skills.
And, but he said he had him go outdoors every day, 40 minutes, sit under a tree and write. He said, he gave him an assignment sometimes and sometimes not. And he said, get a tree away from all the other kids. You and the...
And I really believe in that. Now,
and it works so well.
It works so well. Now, I don't think that that's a necessary substitute for academia and learning. Like I said, my wife's in education, and there's just some things you got to, just buckle down, study, and learn and know. But you don't have to do it at the exclusion of being outside.
Right. He mixed them up,
Yeah.
And they had to do it was like 30-page report at the end of, it was like, what do they call those in college a term paper.
Yeah.
She had to do a term paper at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And then you read it like, oh, wow.
Because another thing that they found that nature does for us is creativity. A lot of people say, well, I'm not creative. I can't write, or I can't draw, or whatever. I was telling you earlier that I'm not much of an artist or anything like that. But our creativity goes up the more you spend time outside. So, kind of where I'm going with all this.
Well, I just want to put in a plug. You are not saying that you should skip your church service to go hiking.
Right.
Yeah, you hike after the church service or the day after.
Right, which is...
just wanted to put a plug in there.
Thank
for
you.
that.
We can talk about that because in this transition that you mentioned that I get to do, I get the best of both worlds. 2 of God's greatest creations is His church and outdoors. He's created both of them. And so I'm looking at all this science that, we now know scientists are studying these things that are true about what nature does for us, and forest bathing, what it does for us and all that. And I'm saying, this is God that's done this. The psalmist wrote that the forest itself will exalt the glory of God. And God tells the sea, He says, roar with magnificence.
Sure.
He tells the forest to sing. Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 6, He says, listen, God has created such beauty. Look at the flowers. And He uses that as a metaphor to say, don't you think He's going to take care of you if He took care of that flower?
Yeah, boy. And on a bigger scale, we've talked about some simple things for happiness and perhaps being healthier. Gratitude, laughing, smiling, walking in the forest, doing some volunteer work to help somebody. Simple things that can give us, forgiveness. Some really simple things that can take us miles on our journey of having a happier soul, so to speak.
And doing that on a regular basis, getting outside, like I said, at least 2 hours a week, can do that over a period of time. It can change your moods to quite an extent. There's even now lots of research and study on the subject of awe, which the Bible talks about. The awe of creation, and creation just declares look at the stars in the sky and the moon and all of that, just declares the glory of God. That's awe. And we've all been there, looked over a landscape or a sunset or whatever, and just had this awe experience.
Wow. Yeah.
They're thinking I think there's like 6 major emotions now that like psychology identifies: fear, anger, all those kinds of things. Well, they're thinking about adding to that list awe as one of our major emotions.
That would be awfully nice if they did. I know that was a full joke.
I see where you're going with that.
Oh, man.
But awe is something that God created for us to see. And there are doctors now in other places in the world, and some in the United States, Western doctors, that are prescribing awe. You need to get out and you need to see something. And that's not just nature, by the way. That can be the birth of a child. When you experience awe, your mood can change. Everything can change. And you can experience all kinds of positive hormonal changes and effects in your body. That's just amazing. The way God created us is just amazing. Time-lapse photography. You guys are into film and whatnot. You see Schwarzenberg's, maybe some of his stuff that he's done for 30 years of time-lapse photography in nature. There's a gal now that I just read about that. She look at a flower, and if you shine ultraviolet light on a flower, all kind of colors are going to come out that you can't see with the naked eye. So she's been doing time-lapse photography on flowers using ultraviolet light, and just seeing all the different colors come out that you normally wouldn't see. And I don't know, that gives me awe. That can take your breath away, some of those things.
Maybe you're onto something for a way of changing the church service. Maybe shine some lights on the congregation.
Hey, you know what?
Yeah, you know what?
It might be kind of dangerous, though.
Yeah. We'll talk about that and other awfully good ideas when we come right back.
We're going to change the church here.
Real people, real stories, real life. We're looking for guests. We're looking for you here on the third chair. I'm Peter, that's Doug, and how many different ways can we have guests?
Oh, at least 3. We could have them here in the studio in Colorado Springs. We've had guests all the way from LA on Zoom, and we have gone on location, and we got our 3rd one already in the planning phase.
Awesome. Send us an email and we'll get you on the show. Welcome back to the third chair. I'm Peter. That is still Doug, and we are here with our special guest, Eric. And we just finished the last segment talking about the advantages for the body, mind, soul, spirit of spending some time outdoors. And I thought you gave some really good suggestions and information about that. We're going to change directions a little bit here. I know that you have been in the ministry and are a pastor of sorts. And so I have some pastor type questions.
Shoot.
Some pastor type questions. What in your time as being a pastor has been your biggest joy in ministry?
Biggest joy in ministry. That's
assuming there is one.
Oh yes, lots of joy. I wouldn't have done it this long.
How long have you
joy.
been a minister?
That's a good question. About 40 years.
40 years.
Yeah,
So
plus a little bit.
Yeah.
One might have snuck in those.
Yeah.
No, lots of joy. Lots of joy. My wife and I have loved being in the ministry. Loved raising our family in the ministry. I have no real horror stories or anything. There's been tough times. There's been a lot of tough times, but it's all been worth it. And I think that that question is really easy. The biggest joy is seeing people who once were without Christ, without any hope, see their lives transformed and their families transformed into a sense of joy. Knowing where they're going to spend eternity. And just again a renewed sense of hope and love for life, and that's by far the biggest joy that I get to experience.
What then would you say is like for you the biggest personal challenge of being a pastor? What's or the hardest part of the job for you?
Yeah, that's another great question, but not too difficult.
Thank you. Yeah, we both wrote these great questions.
Good questions.
For a copy of today's questions.
Doug wrote all the good questions.
Good questions. What was your question again?
Yeah.
What is the biggest challenge? And because that changes over the years, I think. It's changed for me over the years.
Sure.
Because early in my ministry, we still had a Judeo-Christian heritage in this country. You talk to somebody about faith and spiritual issues. First of all, you weren't shunned because, you can't talk about that here. Or you're offending me or anything like that. They just, would sometimes just hang their head and say, yeah, I know, I should probably, get that part of my life squared away or whatever. So there was this understanding that it was real. It just wasn't part of their life for whatever reason. So things like evangelism was much different than it is today. And the challenge back then was simply just I guess, reaching out to folks who had zero interest in spiritual things, and other people were easy, but those that had no interest, it was that was my challenge, to try to work with those people, and I wasn't scared of that, and liked doing that actually and seeing that happen. But today, the biggest challenge. There's two big challenges today. One is time. People just don't have time for spiritual things in their life. And the second is there has been such a very dark, long shadow cast on the church and spirituality as we know it as Christians. Now, spirituality as the world knows it and understands this is a whole different story. But when I'm talking about the church, Christianity and so forth, there's some disparaging thoughts about Christianity and the church and so forth. That some of it is legitimate because of the issues that the church has had, and some of it is not.
Sure.
And dispelling those myths and dispelling the misunderstandings about Christianity is probably a really big challenge right now, because a lot of people have ideas that just aren't accurate.
Now, here's sort of a follow-up question, and that has to do with how to ask this the right way. Was there ever a time, say, as a young man, where you were certain you had all the answers, and then as you've grown over time, that maybe some of those, I don't want to say certainty, but just those thoughts haven't been quite as strong, or you've considered new views on a subject of the church?
All the time. And I want to be open to that. I want to be, there's two emotions that we have as pastors. One is you got to be convicted. You got to be strong. You got to know your stuff,
Right.
We're taught that, and don't waver. You read the book of James, that doesn't, is like tossed to and fro, like a boat on an angry sea. And we don't want to be that guy. But you don't want to be the legalistic, strict guy that is never open to learning and to experiencing new things. And so achieving that balance and that tension between conviction and learning can be challenging in and of itself.
I mean, I don't know what there's some issues, not core issues, but some issues in the Bible that I can see how people of honest faith and integrity could take a certain group of scriptures to come up with one position, and take a certain group of scriptures and come up with an opposite position. Yeah. And they're not trying to be
not being belligerent or anything.
It's and then it doesn't help when you have like Ecclesiastes that say, well, there's a time for war and a time for peace. Right. Well, you can make the case there's a time to be a little more pacifistic and a little more aggressive, and so sometimes I think there are multiple acceptable positions on some issues,
right.
Not who Christ is and deity and God, but on some things, and I don't know, have you seen that in your own life as you've gotten older? It's like, well, I was taught this in seminary, but maybe I'm not so rigid on this as I once was.
For sure. We have a saying that I've used all my life. I know it's not original with our church, but in matters of faith, unity; in matters of opinion, liberty; but in all things, love.
That's good. That's
And,
good.
I've tried to follow that and tried to adhere to that. But here's the big question: what are matters of faith and what are matters of opinion?
Yeah.
I always get a little chuckle when people say, "Well, I just believe the Bible," and they're strict on their stance. Well, what about the guy that believes something different to you, but he says the same thing? Well, I just believe the Bible, because the problem is not with the Bible, right? The problem with our interpretation of the Bible and our understanding of the Bible.
Yeah, and that can be really tricky, because sometimes what was being said for that culture, we try to apply it to this culture, and we have to figure out what's the principle that's really going on. Yeah, I agree with that. So let me ask you this then, and you do not have to answer this question.
Okay.
Looking back, would you say there was ever a time where you thought you made a big mistake in ministry, and if so, how did you handle it?
Oh yeah, I'm more than happy to answer that question, because the answer is yes. How many times you want?
Well, we do have 8 segments.
So, I think the first thing that I always teach young guys is, when you make a mistake, admit it, own it.
Yeah,
That's the first thing.
it's good.
Just own it and say, "This, I screwed up," and make apologies, and make apologies that are more than just "I'm sorry." Anybody can say "I'm sorry."
Yeah.
I think that if it's something that you said from the pulpit, or something that you did in ministry, and you really need to make up for it, you need to acknowledge exactly what you did. And say, I did this. You need to acknowledge that this is not the man I want to be. That's not who I want to be. That's not who I am. And this is what I'm going to do to make up for it.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's
Needs to be
not just a quick sorry.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. And whatever. And then and then never do this when that happens in ministry or in life. Never say "I'm sorry" and then that little word "but." I'm sorry, but. I was hangry, or I was in a hurry, or as soon as you put an excuse on the end of an apology, you've just nullified the apology.
Yeah, I agree. Now, someone might ask you more like what kind of happened around there, but you don't make that part of the apology.
Right.
It's like, no, I was wrong. I own this. Yeah,
I own it.
Yeah, that's good. All right, so let's continue to go where no one else is willing to go, and that is
to a break.
Oh, we're breaking. We're breaking. Breaking news. We're taking a break.
Because I know Peter has a
Saved by the bell.
question.
Hi, I'm Peter from Pikes Peak Recovery Coaching, and as you know, I do help people with drug and alcohol recovery issues. I love to help people get better, but I also offer a variety of other services, including regular life coaching services. I've helped several people write and finish a book. I've helped a doctor that was in medical school graduate and then get into a residency. And I also actually have quite a background in mathematics, and I do some math tutoring for the GED as well as the ASVAB for those that are thinking about a career in the military. So my contact information is on the screen. Please send me an email or a text, and we can talk about some of these services and how I can help. That's Peter Grigg at Pikes Peak Recovery Coaching. Welcome back to the third chair. I'm Peter. That is still Doug, who still believes that accountants are smarter than doctors. And we have our special guest, Eric.
I was watching one of the old episodes, and you said that was proof.
Yeah, probably. Well, we left off asking questions that most people would not ask their pastor, but we're going to anyways. And here's the first one for this segment. I have heard big leaders in ministry say this: God, I'll take care of your work if you just take care of my family. And essentially not treat their spouse and their kids correctly.
Yeah, that's a fallacy.
Would that be a misinterpretation of Scripture, say, or?
Yeah, I think Jesus even called the Pharisees on that at one point in time. They had this practice of not tithing because to the synagogue because they said we don't have to because we don't have to take care of our parents because we work for the Lord. And not giving to that, and Jesus called them out on that and said, no, that's not the way it works. So I think family leaders have to be examples, right?
Yeah, I mean, isn't I heard of something called the Ten Commandments. You may have heard of it. Talked
Once or
about
twice.
Yeah, once or twice. I think I've heard it 10 times. but one of those honor
an
your
awful joke.
honor. Yeah, that was a terrible joke. It was awfully terrible. One of the commandments, honor your parents so that
Right.
your life will go well for you. Basically, that's the only commandment with a promise
Right.
attached.
Exactly right.
And so I guess we're really supposed to do it.
Yeah, and it's tough. We often comment that we live in a fishbowl. We always have. I have 4 kids. They're all grown and gone out of the house now. And I think every one of them have told me at one point in time they don't regret growing up in that fishbowl. Because we were real, we were honest. Our kids got in trouble. And they got out of trouble, and they're living, productive lives. All of them are believers and followers of Christ, and but it wasn't without a lot of trial, a lot of effort, a lot of intentionality.
So when you say fishbowl, you mean like those are the pastor's kids,
Yeah.
and like everyone's watching.
Yeah, they had to grow up with that, and we didn't necessarily shy away from that or try to shield them from that. We also didn't use that as a guilt tool. You better behave because the church that I work with is watching you. We never used it like that, but just as plain acknowledgement. This is your reality. This is life, and but raising them, like I said, with a great amount of intentionality and not assuming anything. That just because they're a pastor's kid that they're going to believe a certain way or they're going to accept a certain truth. We made sure we would teach them just like we would teach anybody else.
Sure. And I would assume that there were times where some of them, like all kids, weren't as enthusiastic about some of those lessons.
Right, exactly. We didn't have any prodigals or anything. None of them did that. But there were some seasons where it was challenging.
Challenging, a little tense, perhaps.
Yep.
Yeah. So you've been doing ministry for 40 years. So a 22-year-old young kid comes to you. He's about to graduate from seminary, and you want to impart to him 1 or 2 ideas that maybe you've learned along the way, but you didn't know when he was that age. What would some of those thoughts be?
I would teach them that ministry. First of all, I'd try to talk them out of it.
Don't go into it.
It
has to be a call.
It has to be a calling. If you could talk somebody out of being ministry, and if they start saying things like, "Well, I never thought of that," or "I don't want to go through that," then they may not be called. They may be doing it because their mom thinks it's a nice idea. But if you realize that they're called, I think the first thing that you have to understand if you're going into ministry is the idea of humility. There's a lot of rock star preachers today. The megachurch phenomenon that we're kind of maybe on the tail end of, I don't know, but it's hard to stay humble when you're getting a lot of attention.
And you're expected to have the answers.
You're expected to be really slick and have all the right phrases and do all the right things. And pastors today have to have a lot more than what I had. My college and seminary was Bible. That's pretty much it. Now you got to have leadership. You got to know budgets. You got to know strategy. You got to know history. You got to know it all and work through that. And once you get to that point, there's some pretty sharp guys that are leading churches now, and they have to be careful about this pride thing. It's a killer.
Sure.
So.
I was thinking I know I was a guest at your church's men's breakfast, which was very good. Thank you. And I got the sense that you're a big believer in the idea of coaching, mentoring. I guess the old-fashioned word would be discipleship.
Right.
Am I reading you right?
You are, and that's what we're trying to be at Sunnyside. Is a church that helps people disciple people. And that,
you can't do it all by yourself?
You cannot do it by yourself. And first of all, there's no such thing as lone Christianity.
Yeah.
You know, and that doesn't mean everybody has to be an extrovert and everybody has to have, be in 5 small groups or whatever. I think you can be an introvert. I'm married to an introvert. But she also is a believer in community and a believer in other people involved in your life, of those people feeding into you and resourcing you, as well as you resourcing and encouraging and all the one another passages that we see in the New Testament. You can't do that by yourself.
Yeah, I agree.
And so the big phraseology today is DMM, or disciple making movements.
Disciple making movements.
And so we've got to figure that out in our culture today.
Sort of that Proverbs, iron sharpens iron.
Iron sharpens iron.
Is that kind of like iron, like sharpening a knife for a sword to go hunting? Or
Exactly.
Yeah.
That'll work. That'll work.
Yeah.
But I think one of our biggest enemies, I've said this before, in our culture, in our day and times to this, Peter, is the electric garage door.
The electric. Explain that. I mean, I know what an electric garage door is. I just don't know your metaphor.
Just about any neighborhood in Colorado Springs anymore, you see people coming home from school or coming home from work, and they're going fast, and a block away they hit the electric garage door open. So by the time they get into their driveway and into their garage, the door's already open. They go in. Before they get out of the car, they hit the button again, and they open the door, and the garage door's already shut. So they don't have to look at a neighbor. They don't have to say hi. They go in, they eat their dinner, they watch TV, they go to bed, they get up and do the same thing.
But there is a change. That houses today are built so close together.
Yeah.
You might have to talk to your neighbor.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
But our culture has learned to just stay away from that. And so they come to church, and in church all we talk about is connectedness and being involved in other people's lives, and everybody's going, they're panicking. Like, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know how to do that,
Yeah.
And so even at work, now even so many people are working remote, and they just want to be by themselves, and so community is going to be a big deal. But I think people are longing for that, and I think COVID opened that kind of as like opening a wound. And it's like, man, I just miss people. They don't know what it's like.
I mean, it's kind of funny. I can remember times where my wife and 4 kids would be at the dinner table, and we'd literally be texting each other. I mean, it's just, or you're not there at all. Everyone,
right.
You got baseball, you got dance, you got soccer, and it's like.
But isn't that community too? I mean,
it
gets
can
away
be
from family sometimes, and sometimes you need to connect as a family.
You do need to connect to a family, but even our busyness as a family sometimes creates more stress than it does positive connection. So sometimes families need to whittle things down, activities and so forth, to just a few meaningful ones, whether it's sporting activities or academic activities or whatever it is, instead of rushing from one thing to the next where you're never really focused.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. Yeah. So one last, this is a big question, and we're not going to have time for it.
So are we going to do it the next segment?
Yeah,
or next week?
I'll save this biggie question for next week.
Oh,
but
so the audience going to come back.
Yeah, that's right.
We want people to post what their question is going to be.
I'll give you a hint, though. It has to do. We've seen a lot of horrible things. Catholic Church, Church of England, lots of denominations in the United States, pastors abusing their position, sexual assault of kids, that kind of thing. The question that we'll talk about is, what do we need to do different?
That's a
as
great
church leaders. But we will ask a more superficial question on our break, which is, we're going to hear about
after our
break, the time he got a ticket in West Virginia.
West Virginia ticket. Okay.
Yes, and did you play I'm a Minister card when we come right back? Doug, most of our viewers and followers know that our new episodes come out on YouTube on Thursday nights.
Right.
But we have a new announcement about the third chair.
Exciting announcement.
Starting with the older episodes, they're now going to be on a TV channel.
Yes, very exciting.
So the TV channel is with the Pikes Peak Library District, Comcast Channel 17 here in Colorado Springs. And I believe the episodes are going to play at 7 o'clock at night, but they may cycle them, and who knows, maybe they'll be on at 2 or 3 in the morning. So if you're in Colorado Springs and you have Comcast and access to Channel 17, you're able to watch the third chair. The episodes are edited a little bit shorter. Some of the commercials are taken out on TV.
It should be exciting.
Yeah, I can finally tell my friends I'm really on TV.
We could tell them we're TV stars.
That's right.
Way too much laughter in between. What's this?
Welcome to the third chair where Peter is really having a good time.
Yeah, well, our special guest Eric here has just told me something very funny of an evangelism program that we both had done a long time ago, and the first question was to elicit a certain response, and like the person just like didn't care about the question. And I was like, what do I do
didn't know
now?
what to do.
Yeah, what do I do now? I guess we're done.
Okay, see ya.
30 seconds. Yeah. Yeah.
So you're going to tell us about your ticket in West Virginia.
Oh, I had a young family. We only had 2 out of our 4 kids at that time, and I went back to see my relatives in West Virginia, and we had this old Buick that was red, easily seen, and my kids were having a good time in the West Virginia hills and the highways doing this, making their stomachs, go up and down. So, Dad, go faster, Dad, go faster, Dad. So I was doing that. As I came up over one, here was a little sheriff guy down at the bottom of this hill. And I go zooming past him, and he's standing there with his gun. It was like something out of Mayberry RFD, and he smiled at me as I zoomed by, and I said, he's going to get me. And sure enough, he followed me, got in his car and followed me, pulled me over. I had Colorado tags on this car, and he said, I forget what he said. He said, you were doing 70 miles an hour. I said, no, I wasn't. This kid couldn't have been 20 years old. And I said, sir, I don't think I was doing that fast. And there's no way, I don't even think this car will go that fast. And he said, nope, it's right here. I got it. And so I was just agitated at that time. And I really wasn't going that fast. He said I was. So this was one of those places, rural West Virginia, where it's probably a big source of income for them. I knew that. I knew he saw my Colorado plates, and so I was going to fight this ticket. So when we got back home, they had a program where you could call a judge, talk to him. So I called the judge and talked to him, and I tell him, said, Your Honor, I don't think I was going as fast as that officer said I was going. And of course, here I am. I got 2 sons that are cops now, so I knew this was, I should have known this was going nowhere. But he said no, but he said, let's just talk about something else. So he talks about my whole life, where I went to school. He just wanted to get to know me, and what was I doing in West Virginia, and I was, told him about my origins there. I was born there and whatnot, and we just had a long conversation. He said, okay, now back to the ticket. And I couldn't believe this judge was doing this. This was like a half-an-hour phone call. And he said, well, I know that officer. I've known him since he was a little boy. And I know the training that he went through on that gun. And if he says you're going that fast, you're going that fast. But I'll tell you what. And he reduced my ticket. I forget what it was reduced to. But he says, next time you come through, please mind your speed and pay attention. And that was the end of that. So that was my
valleys going up and down anymore.
No, up and down the hills.
See, I thought you were going to say one of these little rural towns where they make you take the money and stuff it in an envelope.
Yeah,
and they drive you to a post office and watch you put it in. Yeah.
No, but it turned out to be very nice and very amiable. Discussion with this judge, and he was pretty cool about the whole thing. So.
That's good. That's fantastic. Now. If people want to visit you at Sunnyside or contact, you're going to be involved with the summer camp.
Right.
How can they do that?
Well, there's 3 ways that I would suggest. Is that sunnysidechristian.com is our website, and anybody's welcome to come to church anytime, any Sunday.
Okay, that information will be on the screen.
Okay, 9 and 10:45 our service times on Sunday. I'd love to have you. And then this camp that I'm involved in during the week is campcomo.com. And we'd love to have you there. We have all the schedule and everything is on the website. And then I have a personal website called Renew72. Renew72.com. And it is a retreat that I've developed. 72 stands for 72 hours, which kind of talks about some of the stuff we had at the beginning of the show, and how we actually apply it. And so I have everything from backpacking trips to more of a lodge setting trip, just getting people away out into nature for at least 72 hours and let God do his thing.
That is so cool. Please check that out. The information is on the website. And you've graciously agreed to come back for next week. So in the meantime, good night from all of us here. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell notification icon so you know when we've uploaded new material, and share these episodes with your friends. We'll see you next week.